All right, full disclosure, your professor is a Star Wars nerd. Not only that, but I like all the Star Wars movies. I I love the original trilogy. I love the prequels. I love the Kylo Ren and Rey. I Mandalorian. Some of the cartoons. I like the Ewok adventure when I was a kid. So we're talking about compare and contrast. And so I mentioned that it's like, hey, I love all the Star Wars movies, but I meet a lot of people that say like, well, I like the original and I don't like the prequel. And then they will get into a conversation talking about the similarities and differences, or maybe focused on the positive and the negatives. Basically, they are comparing and contrasting. And that's what we are talking about today. We are talking about the method of compare and contrast. We've touched upon this a little bit when we talked about Mark Twain's Two Ways of Seeing a River, because that is kind of a compare and contrast essay. You're looking at something and you're looking at, you're comparing and contrasting the way you saw it when you were young versus the way you saw it as a grown-up or an adult perspective. So there can be a lot of different strategies to writing a compare and contrast essay, or even just compare and contrast paragraphs. I'm going to tell you about a few of them. And then we might compare and contrast Star Wars just a little bit, maybe. All right, so when I talk about this, I want you to think of compare and contrast as a method of writing. It doesn't have to be an entire essay. I'm not going to give you an assignment that is just all compare and contrast. What we're really building towards is writing arguments and research papers. And so some of the methods and strategies that I will tell you can be a great way of organizing an argument or a research paper or any other type of essay. In fact, in some cases, you might write something that has a few different strategies. You might have an argument essay that does a little bit of process analysis that's explaining how something works. And then you might add some paragraphs that are compare and contrast. So even if you just have one paragraph that's looking at and analyzing the differences and similarities within your topic, that is using the compare and contrast method sprinkled in, a larger essay. So let's talk about the different ways of comparing and contrasting. You probably already know this. You've probably written a compare and contrast essay before. I like to think of them as the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches of the essay world. So compare and contrast is, it's looking at things that are similar and things that are different. However, when I say compare and contrast, for your purposes, I don't want you to feel like you have to spend equal time with similarities and differences. In fact, it's often good if you are looking at, say, two subjects that are very different from each other. I will say, for example, let's say, what do I got? I got two things. I got a cup of iced tea and a pair of glasses. Two objects that are very different. So if you were forced to write about these two things, you might say, well, gosh, I'll talk about how different they are. That'll take up a lot of word count. One's used to make you see things clearly, and the other one you drink with a straw. Very different things. But you know what? All those differences are going to be very boring. I'm interested in students that can take two different things and come up with some similarities. And now that I'm holding these two and I feel like I've challenged myself to come up with what's similar about these two things. So let me take a crack at it. Obviously, the similarity is I own both of these things, and another similarity is that I use both of these things during my writing process. So when I'm working on a novel, I've got my glasses on and I have my iced tea. So these are both things that I need in order to write. Here's another similarity, though. Even though I need or desperately want both of these things in order to write, these are both ways of distracting myself. I don't know how you feel when you're doing homework or when you're working on something or writing something, but there's part of my brain that doesn't want to be productive. And so these two little objects, they share the ability to distract me. Because if I want to fidget, I take off my glasses and I start spinning this around, and then I get hypnotized. And this one, I like to sort of just, if I'm, again, drifting off in space, I will start to fidget with the straw. So I use both of them to fidget, and I kind of use it as an excuse to let my mind wander. And I can also go as far, if I really want to distract myself, I might decide, like, you know what, these glasses, I need to clean them. Then I will get up away from my desk and I'll go clean my glasses. Or like, you know what, this is it's only half full, I better refill this. So both objects help me, both objects I can fidget with, and both objects, they can ultimately be a tool for me to get up and walk away from what I should be working on. There you go. Similarities of two very different objects. Now, hopefully that was a fun tangent for you. I don't know if I'll keep that or not. So the reverse then, we can say the reverse is true. So if two subjects are very different and we find and analyze key similarities, if that's my suggestion for you, then the reverse is true. If two subjects are very similar, then you should focus on what is different about them. So going back to Star Wars, right? If we have two movies that are very similar, like the first Star Wars, A New Hope, and the second movie, Empire Strikes Back, they both have a lot of the same characters. It's the same style of filmmaking. It's a lot of the same editors and special effects artists. So what's different about those? And so if I was writing about the differences between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, I get to decide, what do I want to focus on? Is it maybe it's the relationship between Luke and Vader in the first movie versus Empire Strikes Back? It becomes very different. Right? Spoiler alert, it turns into a father-son story. So you get to decide, what do you want to focus on when you are looking at those key differences. So there's a lot of different ways to organize compare and contrast writing, and it kind of depends on if you are sharing an opinion or if you're just providing what you think of as relatively objective information. If you are comparing and contrasting to show the advantages and or disadvantages of something, then you can think of your compare and contrast writing as like scales. Like you've got two subjects. Notice I'm focusing on two. If we're going to compare and contrast 3 or 4 or 5 things, that's not what I think of as a compare and contrast essay. That would be a division classification essay, and I'll talk about that later. So compare and contrast is just two things, and if we think of them as scales, right? So you've got two subjects and you're looking at the different aspects of them and you're trying to decide, which movie is better, or which restaurant has better food, what career is a better choice for me, right? So you're weighing the pros and the cons, the advantages and the disadvantages. That's a great way of looking at compare and contrast. But another way of looking at it is to think of yourself as signposts, that you're letting us know which direction we should go. Here's what I mean by signposts. If we're exploring Disneyland versus Magic Mountain, instead of just saying like, oh, one's bad and one's good, instead of doing that, you might say, hey, if you love intense roller coasters and you are a thrill seeker and you don't mind, if the food's not that great, you definitely want to go to Magic Mountain. If you want something that's more family friendly, that's more about the sort of the atmosphere and the experience and the music and the lights, you want to go to Disneyland over there. If you don't mind spending a lot of money, go to Disneyland. If you're cheap, go to Magic Mountain, right? So signposts, it's not necessarily saying like, oh, this one's bad and this one's good. It's basically saying, oh, do you fit into this category? Go over here. You fit in this category? Go over there. All right, so I'm going to have you watch something, and it's not actually going to be Star Wars related. It's going to be Disney related, though. I'm going to include links to 2 short films. Actually, the first one is a short snippet of a longer film by Pixar. So I want you to watch one of the opening scenes in Disney Pixar's Up. And if you haven't seen Up, this it's kind of a sad, bittersweet. If you've seen the opening of Up, then you know it's like, oh gosh, I'll get my Kleenex ready because this is going to be sad and I'm going to cry. Thank you, Professor Bradford. So I want you to watch that 5-minute clip of Up, and then I want you to watch. It's about a 10-minute film, and this comes from a Russian student, a Russian animation student. From several years ago. I stumbled upon this video, and I think that there are some interesting similarities and differences between Up and this Russian film that's called The Invention of Love. So what I'd like you to do is watch both of these, and then directly after you're done watching it, I would like you to go to our discussion page and tell us what similarities and differences that you observed. So what are some key similarities or key differences that you want to talk about. And please read other people's comments and share what, talk about what they discovered. We'll get sort of an online writers community going. Talk about, and again, you can talk about which one's your favorite and which one's your least favorite, but you can also be more like signposts, seeing different things like, oh, well, gosh, if you're a younger viewer, you'd like this one, and if you're an older, more mature viewer, you'd like this one. To give you sort of like a hint of what I'm hoping that you're going to look for, I'm hoping that you'll sort of focus on different points, different aspects of it. So pay attention to things like maybe the animation style or the character design. Pay attention to maybe the use of music or the use of color. Also pay attention to what happens, the characters and the plot, the events that occur. So look for what you think is similar and different about Disney Pixar's Up and the invention of love. All right, that's it for now. Enjoy that. Get ready to cry if you haven't seen Up before. It might make you a little sad. So that's it for now. Have a good time watching those, and I look forward to reading your discussion comments.